The Chinatown Gate, which was a gift from the Taiwanese government in 1982, has become a landmark for Boston's Chinatown. Behind the gate, the lively scene full of Cantonese and Mandarin-speaking people reminds us little of the suffering that the locals had endured in the past. To get a good sense of the issues that Chinatown and its people face today, it is important to look at its history. The origins of Chinatown can be traced back to the Old China trade, which happened between 1784 to 1842. The U.S. imported products such as silk and tea from China, and one of the results of this exchange was that Chinese merchants were able to settle in Boston. This advertisement from 1865 is one of the earliest evidence of a Chinese shop located in the area. The origins of Chinatown can also be traced back to 1870, when 75 Chinese workers were brought in from California to break up a labor strike in Samson's shoe factory. In the following years, many Chinese workers followed their footsteps in search for job opportunities as the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad finished, and anti-Chinese sentiments rose in California. Not far from Chinatown Gate, the Pingyang Alley, which runs between Oxford and Edinburgh Street, is considered by many locals to be the birthplace of Chinatown. In 1878, former Chinese railroad workers, now working in shoe factories, set up a tent on this now shabby alley. Workers like these likely remained bachelor because of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. Pictures like this one, taken in 1920, were extremely rare in the late 19th and early 20th century, since only the rich merchants had the resource to bring their wives and kids to Boston. Today, Beach Street is full of Chinese restaurants, just like more than 100 years ago, when Chinese merchants and workers began establishing restaurants on this street and Harrison Avenue. Believed to be the first Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, Hong Far Lo, as its tiled doorstep suggests, was established in 1879. However, restaurants like Lok Sen Lo and Bung Fang Lo quickly followed and provided competition in the early 20th century. Chinese-owned laundries, like the one depicted in this picture taken in 1901, emerged almost at the same time as Hong Far Lo and gained immense popularity until the 1970s. Despite the integration into America's workforce and the financial success of certain individuals, anti-Chinese sentiments were strong, and the Chinese remained politically weak. The following newspaper from 1903 depicts police brutality towards the Chinese in the notorious Chinatown immigration raid. After the raid that arrested more than 300 and deported more than 50 men, the relations between the locals and the police improved. But throughout the exclusion era, raids like this in the 1935 photo were constant. This Dunkin' Donut, on the border of Chinatown and next to the subway stop, used to be part of what is known as the combat zone. From early 1960s to late 1970s, this Dunkin' Donuts used to be an adult entertainment store, like many other stores on Washington Street. Nowadays, the street bordering Chinatown is normal and peaceful, but it used to be known for the adult industry, prostitution, drugs, violence, and crime. The combat zone reflects a political vulnerability of the Chinatown locals. The area got its name because the adult industry would attract soldiers and sailors from the Boston Navy Yard, and they would often be in uniforms. In addition, the area was extremely dangerous, so it resembled a war zone in two different ways. It existed at the border of Chinatown because rent was cheap there at the time. But more importantly, the Chinese lacked a political power and a political voice to keep them out. Fortunately, by late 1970s, factors like the rise in property value, the increasing popularity of home videos, and some grassroots movements from Chinatown ultimately brought the demise of the combat zone. Around the same time that the combat zone began, the government demolished residential buildings in Chinatown like these and displaced many families that have historically lived in those buildings to make way for the construction of Central Artery and the Massachusetts Turnpike extension. Local residents protested and signed petitions, as seen in this 1954 photo. However, the effects were limited, and buildings were still destroyed, including the Chinese Merchant Association building that we see in the background. It lost a third of its height. In the present day, Tufts University controls about a third of the territory in Chinatown. The remaining two-thirds of the territory are slowly being eaten up by real estate developers. On one side of Chinatown Gate, a luxury residential building has been newly built, and many similar ones have been built around Chinatown. This has driven the price of the local property up and has forced a lot of the Chinese residents away from Chinatown. On the other side of Chinatown Gate is a mural of some traditional Chinese folklore characters. Next to the mural are aging residents playing card games and talking to each other in their most familiar language. What would Chinatown be like in the future? It is very difficult to say, but looking